wouldn't mind, or if you're interested, in the chat, please share your school or university affiliation, the content area or areas and or grade levels that you supervise typically. And how many years have you attended the STENT conference?
Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Lisa.
How are
Good. How are you? This is recording, I guess. I didn't hit the button, but it seemed like when I jumped in, things
Yes,
were.
automatically being recorded. So just because I have forgotten a few times. So
Well, should we? I don't know how things are going with timing. Should we start on time or should we wait a little bit or what? Do you have any insight on that, Lisa?
I think in the next, 10:40 is the scheduled start time. So maybe wait a minute at least until that time, and then people will probably pop in,
Sure.
but you can get started. I think that's fine. After 10:40, yeah.
Hey, all right. We got 10:40. So I guess maybe one more minute. Oh no, it's 10:41. All right, there was that minute. Time flies. Good morning, everyone. Welcome. So glad all of you could be here. And it's nice, I see in the chat, we have a nice mix of people from different areas, but also a number of people who have spent more or less time attending the STENT conference. My name is Matt Wallace. And I work in the UC Davis credential program. And I primarily supervise in single subject math or middle and high school math is usually where I'm supervising, although I've been known to supervise a multiple subject candidate or two. And I've been to this every year, this conference that is. I've been to this conference every year it's been around. So that's 5, Lisa, is that right?
That's right. This is our 5th year.
All right. Well, that's hard to believe, but I'm
I
glad this is
know.
fun and excited that there's so many people attending.
Me
Um,
too.
Before we get going too much, I just want to start us off by maybe establishing or suggesting anyway some agreements or some norms that we can follow through here. So first and foremost, we're on Zoom. I get that, but it's summertime, which is the casual time of year for me anyway. So let's keep this casual. If you have a question or an insight or a comment or anything, just feel free to interrupt, unmute yourself, or just stay unmuted and just by all means interrupt me at any time. Or you can put things in the chat as well. I'll do my best to try and manage the chat, but I may not get to it right away.
I can help with that too, Matt, if you'd like.
Great, thank you. Yeah, but I'm happy to just have people just chime in or post questions whenever it moves them to. There's going to be lots of opportunities to chat in breakout rooms. So I want to encourage you to try to monitor your participation. For some of you who are eager to dive in and start talking about things, great. But also give other people opportunities to have the floor, to share their thinking and so forth. And so for those of you who may be more reserved, I encourage you to put yourself out there and your ideas out there. And I say that because of this next bullet, none of us know all things, but all of us know some things. So we really do learn from each other. And I think it's really important that we all have opportunities to share our thinking and our ideas because we're all going to learn from each other. And I hope to get lots of ideas from all of you today in the same ways that I hope all of you get lots of new ideas from each other in breakout rooms. And one of the ways that we do that, I think, is by sharing our rough draft ideas. So just like a rough draft and maybe an English language arts class, we have rough draft ideas that maybe aren't polished, maybe they're not complete, or maybe we don't even know what's in our head. But I encourage you not to be selfish and keep those ideas to yourself, but really share those rough draft thoughts, because you have no idea how helpful those rough draft ideas might be for sparking a new conversation or sparking someone else's thinking, or maybe you sharing that idea leads to some discussions that help you further your own ideas and thinking. And in that spirit, this session is really about me sharing a rough draft of my ideas. It's not a polished product by any means. It's just something I tried out this year, and we'll get into more of that later. But I really hope to get some good ideas from all of you to continue to refine what I've been up to, at least over this past year. And last but not least, I hope that all of us spend some time outside of our comfort zone. And I mean that in a good way, because I really do think that's where a lot of our learning happens. And stepping outside of your comfort zone is going to look differently for all of us. For some of you, being outside of your comfort zone, maybe just entertaining some ideas today longer than you might have otherwise. Other people stepping outside of your comfort zone, maybe taking these ideas, trying them out this year, or maybe you're already, no, I don't know if you're supervising already, but whenever you start supervising, trying these ideas out, or maybe it's even something else. But whatever it is, your learning is mostly going to benefit the teacher candidates and the students we're working with, and that I'd argue is what's most important. All right, so hey, I said there's going to be some time to chat, so I'm going to invite you to a breakout room now. Keeping our norms in mind, and I'll ask you just to quickly introduce yourself, and then some other questions or things to consider. One is, what are your thoughts or ideas about how teacher candidates or pre-service teachers, whatever you call them, how they can recognize and address the diverse and specific needs of all the students in their care, and how can we as supervisors support our teacher candidates in that work? So let me put these in the chat so that you have them to reference. And hopefully, yes, there they are. And then oh
You
gosh.
want me to help with breakout rooms?
Sure, that'd be great, Lisa, if you
How
wouldn't
many
mind.
how many people do you want in each room?
Yeah, well, let's we got 45 people here. Maybe let's do 9 breakout rooms. 46. Oh no, that's oh, but there's 2 of us, so that still works. Yeah, let's do 9.
They should be good to go. And then if you and I want to join, we can.
Great. I gladly feel less versed in Zoom.
I know it.
I haven't been a
Good
Zoom
thing
host in a
we're,
while. I've been
yeah,
just joining, but
I know you forget
this
you have
other
to
stuff.
manage. Yeah. Okay, I'm going to pause the recording.
enough time to have some beginning conversations about how you might currently are working with the teacher candidates in your care to support them with recognizing and addressing all the needs of their various students. So for context, I want to share with you what that looks like for me and the students that I work with, or the teacher candidates that I work with. So in methods class, teacher candidates learn a few different ways about how to address the needs of their students. And one of the ways is through differentiation. So thinking about providing students with a variety of different resources and giving students the choice of what resources are most helpful or beneficial for them. So some examples that teacher candidates really are fond of or take up a lot, this notion of, and by the way, so I should say, so I work with math. So there's like hints of math throughout this, but I really try to not make this math specific at all for what it's worth. But hint cards are something that math teachers tend to like. So, and when students are engaging in problem solving tasks, there might be hint cards that place at various points around the room. And students can simply just go up and get a hint from one of the cards if and when they feel like that's helpful for them. Or sentence frames if students might need support with academic language or precision, for example, with math or just explaining or anything else for that matter. They have the choice of using a sentence frame or manipulatives, offering students lots of different manipulatives as a way to make sense of or to work on or to share their thinking. Another way is through UDL, or Universal Design for Learning. So not necessarily thinking about students' needs and supporting them with that, but thinking about possible barriers to learning and trying to remove as many of those barriers as possible. So some examples in math, multiple representations. So using or representing an idea in lots of different ways. So while one representation may be less accessible, other representations might be more accessible to help students make sense of things. Also trying to establish a safe and inclusive community so that students feel comfortable to share their thinking, right or wrong, and so on. Another way that we talk about it is trying to think about, not trying, identifying our students' strengths, mathematical strengths, and leveraging those. A way that I often put it with our teacher candidates is help students use what they have to gain what they don't. For example, if a student's mathematical strength is catching and revising mistakes, you would want to engage in frequent error analysis activities. So students can really leverage that strength to try to make sense of whatever students are working on. So these are just some of the ways, the primary ways anyways, that teacher candidates that I work with are thinking about their students' needs and how to make things as accessible and equitable as possible in the math classrooms that they work in.
You have a question, Matt,
Oh, I do.
in the chat.
Oh, yeah, community and math norms. So a math norm might be mistakes are valuable, or I mentioned earlier that none of us know all things, but all of us know some things. So that might be a community norm. Just an agreement, something that's whether you co-construct with your students or the teachers are sharing with their students, this is what learning and doing math should look and sound like in this classroom. So that's hopefully answers that particular question. Yeah, and then thank you. Katie is offering up another one. Respect is an important one. Yeah, so how students can respectfully agree and disagree. That's an important thing because that happens all the time. So just helping students understand what it looks like, what it sounds like to do certain things in class, whether it's what it looks like and sounds like to collaborate with peers, what it looks like and sounds like when they're doing math, what a mistake looks like and sounds like, all those sorts of things. Because a mistake can look like, oh, I don't get this, or a mistake can look like, oh, I made a mistake. But, you know, mistakes are part of learning. Wrong.
I lost you first. I think we lost you for a second there, Matt.
One of the things that's, oh no, okay. I apologize for this. I don't know what's going on with my internet. That's what Zoom does. I'm gonna turn off my camera in the hopes that my bandwidth is a little stronger now, and hopefully this will work. I have a plan B, but hopefully we don't have to do that. Okay.
That sounds better already. Thanks.
All right. Important to note is that all of this work, they're learning in methods class, but teacher candidates are still needing to implement these ideas in their field placements. So a lot of the work of addressing students taking all these ideas, whether it's differentiation, universal design for learning, or leveraging student strengths, a lot of that work is left to the field placement. So what happens at the field placement? Well, in the field placement, I'm assuming anyways that teacher candidates are working with their mentor teachers and talking about these ideas, talking about the students and their needs, talking about potential barriers to learning, and thinking about what that means for their teaching, among other things. And I'm also assuming that teacher candidates, maybe along with their mentors or maybe separately from there's whatever student information systems are available, whatever data they have available, maybe, grade books and so forth. They're also leveraging or utilizing those tools to try to identify students' needs, and then think about what that means for their teaching and their lessons and so on. And in the classroom in the past, so these are from students from previous cohorts. These are just some idea or examples anyways of what they were up to in their lesson plans. So you can see here, one teacher candidate was thinking about universal design for learning, try to increase access in a variety of different ways there, providing some choice. Here's another teacher candidate who wrote about providing accommodations by giving students a choice of how they work. Flexible groupings might be one way to describe that. They also have different resources to use. Here's another candidate. Yeah, I could go on, but really the point here, if you haven't noticed, is that a lot of the thing that's going on is that these aren't really tailored to students. These are doing activities, or these are doing teaching things for the sake of doing teaching things. These teacher candidates are not saying, I have a student who needs this, so I'm going to do this. They're saying, here's this activity, and I'm just going to do it. I don't know if my students need it. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but this is what I'm going to do. I often refer to that as activity mania. When teacher candidates like learn a new activity or something in their methods class and like, oh, I'm just going to try it out, when they force it into whatever they happen to be teaching rather than using it at an appropriate time because it's relevant, it's useful, and it's going to help them achieve whatever goals they're after. So it's great that I don't want to lose sight of the importance of the work that's going on here, but it would be great if these teacher candidates were really being thoughtful and specifically using strategies for their students' needs and not just doing them because they want to do them. And then what does that look like for supervision? Well, that's me. That's where I come in. And I also have supervision colleagues supervisor colleagues who I work with in the math area. And some of the things that we would do, well, as might go without saying, but we observe and we offer feedback on what our teacher candidates are up to with respect to how they're trying to make their lessons accessible and inclusive, and how they might be or how they may not be doing certain things to support students' needs. So that's part of our regular observation work that we do. We help students think about who students might need more support or who might need more attention or might need to be thinking more about when they're lesson planning. We also spend some time offering ideas about what that might look like. So, hey, here are some students who look like, maybe they're not engaging or getting as much from classes as some other students. So here are some ideas about what you might want to add to or include moving forward so that you can better support these particular students. And then we also offer resources for teacher candidates. This is not really the goal for today, but for what it's worth, I do have a couple of resources that I share with teacher candidates a lot in the folder for this session, if you're curious to know what some of those things look like. But I'm not going to get too much into that. Okay, so that's what happened to supervision. And here are some examples of the support or the feedback, I should say, that I'm offering teacher candidates in the past. And so you can see one of the questions up top is I'm asking students to think about, or I'm asking the teacher candidate to think about their various students. So maybe this is for a teacher candidate who isn't really thinking about different ways to consider or accommodate students' needs or strengths at the moment. Here I'm offering an idea about a sentence starter to support language, some other examples about how to make things more accessible to participate, or how to make things more accessible in terms of understanding the problem. And again, I could go on, but you might notice, just like with the teacher candidates I was working with, a lot of the feedback that I am offering is rather generic as well. So I didn't know the students. I didn't know the students well enough to know what their strengths were. I didn't know the students well enough to know what their needs were, and I didn't know their students well enough to know what their specific barriers to learning were. and how I can best support them. So I'm sort of out in the dark as well. So teacher candidates may not know their students well enough to do it. I don't know their students well enough to do it. And so we're just sort of trying things out and hoping that they stick. But we're really not at the point where we're tailoring things to really address and support our students with their specific needs, strengths, and so on. Raised hand. Sheila, yeah, go for it. Thank you for raising your hand, but you can interrupt me too.
Oh, well, I don't want to be rude and interrupt, but I do have a question I'd like to pose to the group. So I'm hoping it's an appropriate time to do that. One of the things in our PLCs that you see, Irvine, that came up repeatedly was that the student teachers, this is going to sound critical, I don't mean it that way, but that they really don't understand who the heck we are as their supervisors coming in. Like there hasn't been any context provided. All they know is, like in my case, there's someone who's now old enough to be their grandma coming in and starting this relationship. And I'm wondering if on any campuses you have suggestions on what you've done prior to our first meeting with them, either as a cohort or in the triad with their mentor teacher, of how you've handled that on your campuses that we might be able to embed into our classes. Because when we go back to that first question we had in our breakout room, I could be a community of one here, but I think there are a number of us who felt like they don't even know who we are, what they're supposed to do with us, even though we explained it in that first meeting.
Yeah, so Sheila, that's a great question. I may not be the best person to answer that. In our program, I'm not just a not only am I a supervisor, I'm also the methods course instructor for the students that I work with, and I'm also an instructor as part of their I teach a number of different courses. So the group of students I supervise, I see at least three times a week in different classroom settings on the campus. So there's lots of relationship building that goes on, but then there's also just the clarity that goes along with me working so closely with them in lots of different spaces that there isn't, I guess, the uncertainty about what I'm up to or how I might be best supporting them. So all to say that I haven't really had to think about that just because of the design of our program, but I'm sure others might. And I don't know if anyone would like to chime in now or
There are
maybe.
some good ideas in the chat.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, hopefully Sheila, those will help.
And maybe while other people are typing, Katie, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I work for USD, and we used to always have a supervisor meeting, and then right after that, they would have the students come in, and we would sit with our students that we were going to work with and talk and get to know them a little bit better. And the last few years, since COVID started, kind of ruined all that. And we haven't been doing it, but I try to get a one-on-one with them before I have a triad meeting with their teacher. So I try to do both. We're supposed to have a meeting at the beginning where you have the cooperating teacher, the student teacher, and me. But I think it's always nice to meet with the student teacher first, just one-on-one, and find out about them as a person. And they can find about me as a person, just personal things that they feel like they know me a little bit. It's like I am old enough to be their grandmother, like Sheila said. And I taught for a long time, and then retired, and then thought, oh, I'd like to supervise student teachers, because I had so many in the years that I was teaching. I probably had around 30 when I think about it. I taught almost 30 years, and I had lots of years I had two, one every semester. So I never counted them up, but I think that's probably a fair assessment. Anyways, that's what I try to do, just to give, because I remember, and I don't know if you remember this, Sheila, my first semester, I had this woman that her doctor ptosis, and she would come in and my heart would start beating. In fact, I feel like everybody could hear my heart beating because I would be so nervous in front of her. And she would just leave all these comments, and it would be adequate this, adequate this, adequate this. And I just felt like, wow, I'm just not very good. And I never really talked to her as a person, really. I was just scared to death of her. And I tell my student teachers that. I said, I hope when I walk in the room that you never have that reaction, the same reaction. Anyways, that's how I start.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for starting that conversation, Sheila. I hope you got some new ideas from that. So the quote you see here on the slide, I think really speaks to it all. We can't, if we're talking about equity, we can't have a one size fits all approach. That's equal. That's not equity that we're talking about here. So we really need to be mindful of our students, and particularly the ones who are on the margins, and think about what their needs are and how we can make things accessible for them, and not to sort of generalize these things or do this one size fits all approach. So that got me wanting to figure out a way that I could, with the teacher candidates I work with, move away from what we were just doing. And that led me to this idea about empathy interviews. So what are empathy interviews? Well, a couple of key details anyways. They're one-on-one conversations or interviews that you have, or you can have with a small sample of people just to learn about their experiences. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. It's typically made up of lots of open-ended questions to try and get stories and specific experiences from the person you're talking with. It's ideally going to give you crucial guidance and feedback from key stakeholders, in this case, students. One of the phrases that if you look up or you Google and you look into empathy interviews, one of the things that you'll see a lot of is not this exact phrase, but the idea is that in order to work on a problem, it's important to talk to the people who are closest to it. So in this case, students are the ones who are closest to the problem. So we need to talk to the students to figure out how to best solve the problem, and not just assume that our ideas are going to be what's best. Another thing is it helps us empathize, gain a deeper understanding of the user's experience. I don't really like the word user, but empathy interviews are used beyond education. They're not unique to education by any means. In fact, I think they started from in engineering or maybe architecture. So you'll see user because people are talking about it in lots of different spaces, from technology and software to engineering and buildings to classrooms. So it helps us get a better understanding of the user, in our case, experiences on whatever it is that we want to be exploring or considering or working on. So for us specifically, thinking about teacher candidates and what this means for them, teacher candidates are going to interview students who are at the margins to learn about their classroom experiences, understand what barriers they face to learning, and recognize what might be best to support them in their learning. So with that, I'll give you a moment to see what our empathy interview looked like. So we'll stay here. We're not going to go into breakout rooms. I'm going to put in the chat a Google Doc. Hopefully you'll have access to it if I did what I was supposed to do, but if not, I can quickly toggle things. And I'll just mute myself and give everyone a little time just to read through what our empathy interview looked like. And it looks like my timer is not working. So it's 11:11. We'll go to 11:14. flavor of what that looked like for us. A couple things to note here. One is that, as you may have noticed, teacher candidates interviewed at least two. Some interviewed more, but they were expected to interview at least two students who weren't benefiting from current classroom practices. As you saw in the thing, that could be because they have low grades. I asked teacher candidates to give a survey in the beginning of the year, and so they could also identify a little bit about their students' math identities from that survey. So they can also use that if students had a negative math identity. That might be something that they use to identify students. Ideally, in addition to identifying students who maybe aren't currently benefiting, these students are also people who are not shy about sharing their ideas. Because if you're going to interview someone and their answers are short and sweet, you don't get you don't get a lot to work with. Dr. Herbe, I believe. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Question.
No, you're one of the 1 in 10 who get it right. It's Hervey. Very good. I have a question on, I mean, I've shared some surveys that we do with the students, but are there any legal requirements to do the interviews? I mean, do you have to have like parent permission, or how can you administer those legally?
Yeah. So, well, this is not, we don't need IRB because we're not doing research. This is not anything that's being published. This is just work that typically happens in classrooms. Teachers talk with their students all the time. So because we're not going beyond that, this is not an area where we need consent from parents, because these are minors, or assent from the particular students. Though there are certain precautions that we put in place. One, for example, teacher candidates will always do the interview with another teacher in the room, usually their mentor, just to make sure that there's some other eyes if, for whatever reason, something comes up.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah, good question though. Definitely a question. Yeah, if you really wanted to have your student teachers or teacher candidates turn this into research, teacher research, for example, then they might need to go that extra step to get some consent. Each of these interviews were happening individually, so no group interviews or no focus groups or anything like that. These were done outside of class time, sometimes before school, during lunch, or some other time where it made sense. Passing period, for example, but never take these students away from valuable class time. And then during the interview, or as soon as possible after the interview, teacher candidates would write down as many notes as possible to try and accurately capture student responses. In addition to that, after the teacher candidates jotted down their notes, they shared it with their supervisor. And then the supervisor, the other supervisors I'm working with, met with each teacher candidate to try to make sense of the answers. What are the students saying here? What are the needs? What are maybe some possible strengths? What are some possible barriers to their learning? And then with some student teachers, we couldn't meet in a timely manner because I was feeling an urgency to have these student teachers really get going on this work. Then supervisor or AI try to make sense of student responses to try to uncover needs, strengths, and possible barriers. So I'll share. I dabble in all the various AI sites. So for what it's worth, this is I think a great way to encourage teacher candidates to use AI. There's ChatGPT. I'm actually learning or more fond now of Claude AI, but you just insert student responses and ask AI to identify some needs, strengths, and barriers, and you'll get some answers back. Don't assume that they're all correct. That's important to know. But for what it's worth, this is, I think, a great opportunity or a great way that AI can be used. And then after identifying those things about the students, the supervisors, we would focus our observations on the empathy interviewees. So whoever these students were, we would make focused or intentional observations for what these students were doing, not for the entire lesson or not for the entire observation, but when it made sense to, we would focus our attention on these particular students and take detailed notes regarding how they're participating, how they're thinking, or maybe some of the work that they're doing. And then during the debrief, part of our debrief conversation involved these notes. So we would reflect on the ways that the teacher candidates were trying to make their lessons more accessible, or addressing students' needs, or thinking about how to leverage student strengths. Then we would look at the notes and how these these students were participating or how they were thinking and some of the work that they did, then we would use that evidence to think about and make informed decisions about next steps. So given how these students are participating or maybe not participating in ideal ways, or given how these students are thinking, how can we make this even more accessible? How can we even continue to improve upon how inclusive this lesson was? Or how can we continue to leverage these students' strengths to really get them to benefit even more from what's going on in class? And then we would set realistic goals for next time. So often the teacher candidates would come up with the goals about what they want to do. And this wasn't about I, teacher candidate, am going to do more next time. It's going to be, it's really about the student. So by the next time, I'd like to see the student participate more or participate in these sorts of ways, or I'd really like to get these students to do this or do that. So the goal was always about what to look for with students, not what to look for with the teacher. Hopefully that makes sense. Now I'll invite you to think about, well, one, what are your initial thoughts or reactions to the interview that you just read, or just generally speaking about empathy interviews, and what you do now know about empathy interviews. What ideas do you have for how you might be able to use these with the supervision work that you do? So let me, again, put these questions in the chat and give you a chance just to share your thinking and maybe brainstorm about how you might use these. And I really want to remind you all this point about rough draft ideas. I know that you're just initially being introduced to this, so you don't have to have everything figured out. No one is an expert here, but we all are experts in some things. So I encourage you to take whatever your level of expertise is, share that rough draft thinking about how you might entertain or make use of empathy interviews. And with that said, maybe we can do 5 minutes in the breakout rooms again, Lisa, same breakout rooms as before, if possible.
Yes, I just opened up all the rooms, so
Hey, all right.
perfect.
See you in
5
5.
minutes. Okay.
Uh-oh, I see some folks are unassigned. Can I invite all of you to a breakout room? All right.
I just assigned them to
Oh,
rooms, I think. Let's
you're,
see if that
Lisa,
works.
you're too good. You're
Thanks, I'm trying to stay on top of it.
Hey, Amy.
Amy was here. She went to room 1.
My internet is lame. I don't know what's going on.
Yeah, it works. It's much better with your video off, but it's,
Okay.
yeah, it's still, I don't know, it's showing up yellow on my end. I don't know what that means, but kind of intermittent, I think. I see Doug in this space. Doug, do you want to be put in a room? I don't see you're unassigned though.
Oh, there he goes.
Okay. I didn't set a timer, but hopefully. I was thinking this would be nice to do with our student teachers as well, like empathy interviews.
Oh, yeah, that's a great idea.
Parallels, you know, to kind of try it out with them, and then they can do something similar with their students in their classrooms. So
Yeah. Yeah, I want to be excited for this year, but I just lost another student yesterday.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, well, it's just,
Darn it.
I gotta, usually I don't have to force it. I'm like, yeah, I'm really excited for this year, but now just with numbers,
Yeah,
I mean, I'm excited for the group, but I'm just the,
it's hard. Yeah.
we need good teacher. We just need teachers. I
I
mean, the good.
know. I know. What was their reasoning?
Um, Issues with getting and you'll see there's two different teacher candidates notes. One teacher candidate elected to just type in or write students' responses question for question. Another teacher chose to summarize the entire interview afterwards. So you get kind of an idea about what those are, what it might look like after these teacher candidates did the interview. So I'll see if I can set my timer now and give you a chance to make sense of it. And maybe we won't go the total 5 minutes um, in the interest of time.
I had to make a copy of the document. I don't know if others
Oh,
have.
yeah, sorry. So that's
It's
by
fine.
design.
Yeah.
I wanted you to make a copy because it's yours to highlight, to annotate, to do as you wish. And thank you for bringing that up, Lisa, because I have a prompt here. What stands out to you? So as you're reading, I invite you to highlight anything that you think is important or noteworthy or anything that is just wow. So please do so because it is your own copy that you're working with. We'll end at the 1 minute mark, so 40 more seconds. All right, hopefully that was enough time to at least get through one of the teacher candidates' notes. And now I'll invite you to back into breakout rooms. Just not a lot of time, but a little time anyways, just to chat about what stood out to you. What were some of the things that you highlighted as you were reading, and how might that be useful? We're supervising, and this is information we now have access to that we might not have otherwise known. So how might you use that as a supervisor? And don't forget about those rough draft ideas. All right, couple minutes, no more than that, Lisa, if you don't mind, into breakout rooms.
Sounds good. I just opened them.
Everyone, sorry, I know that wasn't a great deal of time, but hopefully enough for at least some initial ideas and brainstorming. So I thought I'd just share with you some of the things that I learned and gleaned from the work this year I did with empathy interviews. So one, I think that's, or I'm convinced anyways, that teacher candidates are really able to uncover a variety of new information about their students and their needs. So this was a screen capture from one of the teacher candidates notes that you noticed. And some of the things that we noticed, one, this particular student's math identity, not very confident, not feeling like a very capable mathematician. So their math identity, or specifically their negative math identity, might be a barrier to participating. They might not feel like they have much value to contribute. So we might want to be mindful of their identity when we're trying to encourage them to or take down barriers to participation. Another possible barrier to participation was lots of distracting talk that's going on in the classroom, and something we might want to be mindful of. And still other things, we identified a strength. This particular student's strength might be getting and receiving help from others, or giving and receiving help, I should say. So we might want to leverage that strength by perhaps creating lots of opportunities for collaboration or pair shares or some other things that are going on in class to really take advantage of what this student perceives as something they're really good at. So we want to use that as they're learning math. It also helped with the teacher candidates and their lesson planning. So here are some examples. One is our teacher candidates are now thinking about student strengths, but specifically thinking about the students they interviewed and know strengths and how to leverage them. And now you might notice that they're not just doing this activity mania thing. They're not just trying these things out just for sake of trying them out, but they're thinking about students and specifically what things are going to help those students. So no more is it, I'm doing a think, pair, share just because, and maybe it will work, maybe it won't, but it's, I'm doing this because I have a student who's really going to need this to best support them in their learning. So
Quick
it's
question, Matt. Just
Yeah.
if I can interrupt. Someone asked, when you're doing the interviews, do you give, is it pure just listening? There's not a lot of feedback. So my instinct would be to tell the student, you know, respond somehow in the interview, like you're good at math, or you
we talk a little bit about, I mean, I don't just give them this thing and say go do it. We definitely talk about the importance of asking lots of follow-up questions, and the more that you get from your students, the more helpful it's going to be. And some of the things I think they learned, and I was going to talk about this later, but I can share it now, is that those who spent the time to really ask those follow-up questions really had a lot more to go with moving forward. And those who didn't, they realized, oh, maybe I wasn't asking these questions well enough because I don't have as much information as you, cohort mate. So maybe I should go back and do these things again. So in their conversations, they're learning, but I wasn't training them to be teacher researchers in this moment. This is really about just trying to help some kids learn some math. So there wasn't a whole lot of training on how to be an interviewer, if you know what I mean. Other things that allowed me as a supervisor to offer really specific feedback about what students were up to in class. And so that feedback was helpful because then we could talk about it much later. So I don't have the time, but you can see hopefully that if you did look at and read these things, you'll notice that I'm talking specifically about certain students and what they're up to in class and maybe how they're responding to some of the things that the teacher candidate is trying out. And then we can use that information to think about next steps. And last but not least, here are some comments from the teacher candidates towards the end of the year. And this didn't seem like it was a heavy lift for them. And it also helped them uncover some really important information. I know that our teacher candidates are so busy and they have so much going on. And part of me always feels guilty about adding one more thing to their workload. But it really was nice to learn at the end of the year that these teacher candidates not only saw the benefit in it, but they saw that this wasn't a really big ask and something that is realistic for them to do. And I hope that also came through in reading the notes and seeing that these aren't like grand 5-page responses that these teacher candidates were putting together. So a couple of challenges that I experienced this year that I think are noteworthy. One is selecting students and student interest. So some of the students who perhaps would be best to interview were also the students that the teacher candidate didn't have a strong enough relationship with. And so they weren't inclined to volunteer to do these sorts of empathy interviews because there just wasn't that rapport there. And that was a great conversation to have with the teacher candidates. But also maybe one of the challenges with this is that maybe there's some students who we really want to interview, but these teacher candidates need to work on building relationships first before they can get to the space where they're like, can I ask you these questions? Of course, quality of I mentioned this earlier, so the quality of notes varies. Some teacher candidates didn't always ask the great follow-up questions. And so that also led to some more ahas or insights, but really important to get as much information as possible because that is really what's going to inform moving forward. Sometimes it was challenging for teacher candidates to identify different needs and barriers, which I think is important because it's part of they're on their journey, and some of them are coming in with perhaps deficit views. And so this is part of that journey. They're not just like a light switch flip from deficit to asset thinking. But it definitely was not as easy for some as for others. And also sometimes just in reading our teacher or in reading the teacher candidate notes, it was hard to identify what some needs and barriers were. And in those instances, sometimes they decided to go back to ask follow-up questions, or sometimes they decided to do some observations about who these students were to try to maybe uncover some things that they couldn't uncover from the interview or from the questions they asked or so forth. Unfortunately, for 2 teacher candidates I work with, the students they interviewed ended up transferring to a different class. So that information, while still valuable, we can hand off to another teacher, but was no longer useful for the teacher candidate and the work they did that year. Some were excited about interviewing another student. Others were just wanting to focus on the students that were remaining in class. And lastly, growth takes time. And some of these teacher candidates were really hoping for immediate growth. Hey, I'm going to try this new, okay, I know what the student needs. I'm going to try this thing out and I'm going to see immediate participation. I'm going to see these students go from low grades to high grades, quotes around those things. And obviously that doesn't happen. So some frustration comes along with this, and also some important reminders to teacher candidates that this is we're playing the long game. This is not a students will be able to moment. This is this is about a much longer term goal that we have for our students and trying to help them, in our case, learn some math or science or English or whatever it happens to be. Okay, sorry, we are over time, so we don't have time for this. And I don't want to hold anyone hostage here, so I'll quickly, we don't have time for that either. I'll quickly say thank you all for being here. I hope you got something out of this. And I appreciated all the things in the chat. I learned a lot, and I encourage you to reach out if you want to keep the conversation going. And for those of you who just want to hang out and still ask some questions, I'm happy to stick around and eat up your lunchtime, pun intended.
Thanks, Matt. That was very just a great, I agree. It seems like it's doable, right? It's feasible. Just to take that time to really listen to our students and learn about them. So thanks everyone for being here.
Yeah, and
Matt has offered to hang out and answer questions, so feel free to keep the conversation going. We have a break until 12:10 now. Becca and I will be in the meeting space if you want to come have your lunch with us. Bring it to that Zoom space, but I will just let Matt see if there are questions. So
thank you. I should say too. Also, I forgot to, but I will put these slides in the folder for the session so that you should have access to them. It won't happen during lunch, but a little later today they'll be up there.
Any questions for Matt?
It's Kim, Matt, and Lisa, and everybody else. I just wanted to share that our group talked about using these with our student teachers. And so we started a list of things that we might ask so that we model this with our student teachers before they go into the classroom. And so I just thought you might be interested in that, Matt, knowing that we've taken that in a different route.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Kim. And Lisa brought that up too, which me think maybe we should put our heads together and do this. And I think it's also a great way to model the importance of those
Mhm.
follow-up, because that's really where the information is coming, not from that first question, but from the third and the fourth and the fifth.
Great minds think alike, Kim. Same idea.
So Matt, I have maybe too many things, so I'm going to apologize beforehand. Really enjoyed all the good things you do, and we're both coming from math ed, and so part of it was how much of the protocol is particular to the needs of math and how math is such a struggling subject for so many people, and how that might look different for other subjects, but it's plain, there's something you have to deal with the math, which is anxiety and how people come to it. So appreciated all the good work you're doing in that. Really love the questions. Love the second set of questions, the optional questions, more than the original questions. I
Mhm.
just looking at them, they're just really wonderful, and they're more open in some ways. And I don't know what you need from because the first set of questions are very specific, and you get to some very detailed, discrete kinds of things that are happening for students. But the other ones open up a different kind of relationship or kind of knowledge of the students. So the optional questions are really, really strong. The first set of questions, just noticing that there's one question about interests outside of school, and the thought being, would it be worthwhile to have another question that links some kinds of math learning or knowledge or care to what their lives are like outside of school? Because lots of times in our protocols, we situate children as school beings. And how are they more than school beings? And how in math are they more than school beings? Because that's one of the things we struggle with, is that math is understood as this school thing, but they might be doing all kinds of interesting things out of school that are not situated in school. I had one other thought.
Well, these are great. Please don't. Yeah,
Yeah.
keep
Well, the last one, and this one's a little critical, so do take it with care.
sure.
Um, if we're asking our candidates to look for the kids who are having trouble in math, is that already biasing them towards the people that they're talking to?
Hmm.
I'm sorry I gave you
That's a
too
great
much, but you
point.
made me think about lots of things, Matt, so I appreciate that.
No, and that's great food for thought. I appreciate that. I mean, that's something I haven't. It's not wasn't unlooked, but definitely something I should probably think a whole lot more about. You're right, and the whole notion about grades and who's assigning these grades and how they came to be and everything else too.
Well,
So if
there was one thing that Laura put a note in. Laura was in my group, and she brought up this really great thing that made me like, whoa, I hadn't thought about that way. One of the notions of the protocol that she brought up, which was really worthwhile, was, do the kids in the act of working the protocol see it as an assignment or a possibility of making something better for themselves? Because how they relate to that means they'll answer it differently. And one of the things she asked was like about the conversation, because if the student teacher is having a conversation, what might be gotten from that in a kind and considerate way may be more fruitful than if the kids understand the protocol as something that the teacher needs from me.
right, right, yeah.
So.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you. I definitely appreciate you sharing your thoughts, Johnny, and giving me some ideas about things to think about moving forward to help continue to improve upon this work.
I'm sorry if it's a bit much, but you made me think about things. So much appreciation.
No, it wasn't too much at all. I enjoy hearing your thoughts. So thank you for sharing.
Okay, I'm gonna leave and go to the other space, but maybe if you can keep talking, I don't know what will happen when I leave. We'll see.
All right. Thank you,
Thanks
Lisa.
everyone for being here.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, thanks.
Have a great year.
You
Yeah.
as well.
Anyone else want to chat or have a question to ask? All right. Well, if not, I will end this meeting here. Thank you all for being here. I hope you found something helpful from this, and all the best with your teacher candidates this year.